Hey, sports bettor. Yes, you. Guess what? Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for its 28th year of NFL action. So, here's what you got to do. Just click the link below in my description box and sign up today. BetUS.com, where the game begins. Long enough to cover the subject and short enough to keep it interesting. Welcome to Outta My League. I'm Nick Diaz. All right, final prediction time for LSU Florida State. You probably know where I'm going to lean, but let me explain what will happen and why. All this offseason, we were bored. You get bored during offseason. But you know what the great thing is about being bored? Your mind wanders into imagination. The bad thing about being bored is that your mind wanders into imagination, which is exactly what we all do every summer leading up to football season. Now, you overthink this hire. You underthink these coaches. You look at this new coaching staff and think, well, where's the continuity? You automatically say that's a bad thing. You overhype this player. You underhype that player. You spend too much damn time reading this magazine, reading these analytics on this website, this metric about that team, the FPI, SP+, CIA, FBI. Stop it! Stop doing that. Stop overthinking it. A wise man once told me, and this wise man was a coach, football is a simple game made complicated by bad coaching. Football is simpler than we make it to be. Football, at its core, is pushing, pulling, and running. Pushing, can you push someone out of the way? Pulling, can you pull someone in the direction you want them to? Running, can you run toward or away from someone faster than them? That's it. And that's all determined by the matchups. So, what is the matchup? Florida State's offensive line versus LSU defensive line. Who has the edge? LSU's defensive line, okay? They can push and pull that offensive line any direction all day. So, assuming that's the case, which we think it will be, if Florida State can't run it with their offensive line and their talented running backs as much as they maybe want to, well, they have to pass it, right? Well, then becomes, can those wide receivers for Florida State run those LSU cornerbacks out of the building? Now, I'll say this. There are still question marks in the cornerback room for LSU because there are many new faces on the cornerback room for LSU. However, they are not inexperienced faces, specifically Jarek Bernard-Converse. I can't tell you how many Florida State articles I've read, podcasts I've heard, people who you cover Florida State saying that the offense's biggest weakness is not necessarily the offensive line. They believe it's the wide receiver room. Well, they only really have one good wide receiver, and that's the 6'7" guy from Florida State. Well, you have Jarek Bernard-Converse, you've got good safeties, you've got some other big guys out there on the edge that can cover him. You only have to shut down one guy, and you know what he's going to do every time. So, if the matchup doesn't favor their offensive line, if the matchup doesn't favor the wide receivers, and to top it all off, LSU's defensive coordinator, Matt House, has not called defensive plays in 3 years because he's been a linebacker coach in the NFL for the last 3 years. So, schematically, Florida State doesn't really know what they're going to see. Y'all, I've said this for several weeks now. I don't know how Florida State is going to consistently move the ball down the field for 4 quarters. I'm not saying LSU will be able to. We'll get to that in a second. But that's the reason I'm taking the under on this game. I'd be very, very surprised if Florida State goes over 20 points. I'd be very, very surprised. If they did, it would probably have to be a special teams touchdown or a defensive touchdown. I just don't see it. But the question is, will LSU's offense score over 20 points? So can LSU's offensive line push Florida State's defensive line like they want to? I honestly don't really know. I mean, physically, yes, LSU can. They're capable of. They have the talent and they have the size and all that. But you have a true freshman, left tackle, going up against arguably Florida State's best player at defensive end. You have Miles Frazier, your left guard, who's a sophomore playing that position at left guard for the very first time. You have Garrett Dellinger, a sophomore, playing center for the first time in his life. Anthony Bradford at right guard, he's a junior. He's very talented. That's his natural position at guard. But he hasn't exactly proven he can be that guy yet. And on top of it, You have a guy that you've been trying to replace all offseason with either moving someone else to right tackle like Bradford or trying to get the guy Tyler Steen from Vanderbilt to transfer over to LSU to be your right tackle. Cam Wire, he's sort of the placeholder, to put it nicely, at right tackle. So, do I like the upside of this offensive line for LSU more than the last 2 years? Yes. But that upside, that may not necessarily show up till later this season. And make no mistake about it, Florida State's defensive line is good. They are. They're not LSU good, but they're still good. They're no slouches. You can't just expect to roll over them. So, let's say, for example, LSU can't run the ball like they want to, even with Jaden Daniels at quarterback. I had a Florida State beat reporter, Carter Carrells, and I asked him about the cornerbacks for Florida State because I knew this issue might come up for LSU with their new and experienced offensive line. How does the cornerbacks for Florida State match up with these great LSU wide receivers? Well, he said that the cornerbacks he's just not feeling very confident about. He said the wide receivers for LSU have a distinct advantage over the corners. Matter of fact, I've just come out and say this. LSU's wide receivers are going to have, the running faster advantage that I talked about earlier. They're going to have that over just about every other cornerback room this season, except maybe Alabama. That will give them a legit competition. So, even if LSU doesn't score as much as they want to, unlike Florida State, there is still a recipe for them to score. There is still a way for them to score. And that's with these wide receivers running buck wild over the Florida State corners. Now, what I did find interesting, and I listened to the replay of the Brian Kelly show, the radio show last night, and Brian Kelly did kind of tip his hand a little on what the game plan might be for Sunday night.
They have linebackers that can run sideline to sideline, so they don't make a lot of tackles inside, but that's not what they're asking them to do. They're plugging the gaps inside and forcing everything out on the perimeter and letting these linebackers run from sideline to sideline. Play a lot of quarter man on the outside, so we're going to see some man coverage, and our guys are going to have to get open. I feel confident the matchups are pretty good, but what they've been able to do for most of last year and this year is kind of sit down on top of people. You've got to go push the ball down the field. You've got to be aggressive, and you've got to throw the ball down the field, and we're going to have to do some of that.
So, Brian Kelly essentially wants to use his wide receivers to take shots downfield because of the way Florida State likes to play defense. I'll say this about the quarterbacks because that's the first thing y'all are going to think of when it comes to taking the shots downfield and winning through the passing game and not the running game. I personally don't think it matters which quarterback plays in this game because as critical as I've been with Jaden Daniels as an intermediate passer, and I have, which based on practice reports and people I've talked to who've been at LSU practice say that's still a little bit inconsistent and a little bit of a question mark, I still think Jaden Daniels throws a beautiful, and I mean a beautiful, deep ball. This game plan really kind of fits well into what Jaden Daniels does. Add an extra runner to help with the offensive line and take shots downfield with these wide receivers, which is his best throws. So it's not like Garrett Nussmeier gives you a better advantage than, say, Jaden Daniels. I think both can win you this game. But Jaden Daniels, who we assume is going to be the starter, which I think at this point it's safe to assume he will be. The game plan fits perfectly for what they want to do. Going further down, the season when they play better defenses, that's where things go up in the air. But I think LSU has a relatively conservative game plan. Running up the middle of the field, running and passing, RPOs, and occasionally taking a shot down the field. Because here's the thing, Brian Kelly knows Florida State won't be able to move the ball against LSU's defense. He knows that. Yeah, but Nick, that's what you said last year about UCLA and LSU. LSU just had so much more talent at this position and that position. True, I did say that. But also, I didn't predict LSU's head coach would be gallivanting downtown LA the night before the game, nor did I expect LSU's offensive coordinator to be completely negligent and incapable of getting a play in on time or forget how to run a damn screen pass against a blitz. I learned that shit playing Madden when I was in the 6th grade. The spread is 3 points. I don't think it's a blowout. Why? Because I never predict blowouts, unless it's, LSU gets an FCS opponent. But other than that, LSU covers the spread. LSU wins this game 24-13. Brian Kelly era starts 1-0. Thanks for listening to Out of My League. If you like what you heard, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Or follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok in the description link below.